So a lot of times when we're solving a matrix, we're not going to know at the start which one of our cases it is. But now we know when one of those strange situations happens, so when our variable disappears and we're left with either a true or false statement, we now know what to look for, right? We now know how to write our final answer in that. So we're going to look at two examples, probably going to illustrate one of those special cases. But again, notice we're not going to know until a certain point in the problem which one of the special cases we're dealing with. Okay, so let me start off by writing our augmented matrix. So 2, 4, negative 6, and then 10, 1, negative 1, 1, and 4, 1, 2, negative 3, and 7. Okay. Now, first goal is to get a 1 in the upper left corner, so I'm going to do a row swap with row 2. All right, do it with row 3 if I want, but I'm going to swap it out with row 2. And I'm going to scroll down here. So 1, negative 1, 1, and 4, 2, 4, negative 6, and 10. Okay, and then row 3 I did not mess with, so I'm just going to bring it down. Okay, so now my goal is to get zeros underneath my 1, the top one. So I'm going to look at what can I multiply 1 by to cancel out with the 2? So negative 2 row 1 plus row 2 in for row 2. And then what can I do with 1 to get it to cancel out with 1? Well, that's just negative row 1 plus row 2. And for negative 1, row 1 plus row 3 in for row 3. Okay. All right, so let's see, in that first one I can see that I've got 4 little spaces, so I'm going to leave some blanks. So we'll stick my matrix down there. And I didn't mess with row 1, so I'm just going to drag that over. And then I'll fill in my blanks. All right, so negative 2 row 1. So I need row 1 to be here. And I need row 2 to be after it. So 2, 4, negative 6, and 10. All right, and what is that? So I get a 0 there, which is kind of what I wanted. Then I get 6 there. And then I get a negative 8. And then I get a 4. I'm sorry, let me check that. That's a 2. Yeah, you got to watch that because one little tiny numerical error like that will cost you the whole problem. Okay, so then let me fill that in there. So then I want negative row 1, so negative row 1 plus row 3. So we'll fill that in. So 1, negative 1, 1, and 4. And row 3 would be 1, 2, negative 3, and 7. Okay. All right, so that gives me a 0, which is why I made my choice. That gives me a 3. That gives me a negative 4. And that gives me a 3. Okay. Now what? Well, I'll scroll over here. So my next goal is to get that middle number to say 1. Right now it says 6, and a row swap isn't going to work for me. So I'm just stuck doing a multiply, and that's good because that's going to bring fractions in. And I have students that have fractions show up and they think, well, they're doing it wrong because they didn't see a fraction in the lesson. Now you have a fraction in the lesson. So I'm going to multiply 1/6 times row 2 in for row 2. Write that a little clearer. Okay, so I did not mess with row 1 or row 3, so let me copy those over. So 0, 3, negative 4, and 3. Okay, so I want 1 6 times 0. I want 1 6 times 6. 1 6 times negative 8. And I ran out of room there, so 1 6 times 2. Well, 1 6 times 0 is 0. 1 6 times 6 is 1. That's why we made that choice, so yay. That is negative 8 over 6, which reduces down to negative 4/3. So notice a fraction showed up, and nothing I can do about that. That's a choice I made, and I'm just going to have to live with it, and I'm okay with that. 1 6 times 2 is 2 6, which reduces down to 1/3. Okay. So now what? Well, I want where that 3 is, I want it to say 0. So what do you multiply 1 by to get it to cancel out with 3? And that's negative 3. So negative 3 times row 2 plus row 3 in for row 3. All right, so negative, so we'll set up a couple of blanks here. Okay. Now, all right, so let's bring down. I did not mess with row 1 or 2. 0, 1, negative 4/3, 1/3. Okay, so let's fill in my numbers. So row 2 would be 0, 1, negative 4/3, and positive 1/3. And then row 3 is 0, 3, negative 4, and 3. Okay, so I get 0 in the top position. Negative 3 times 1 plus 3 gives me 0 as well. Okay. Negative 3, well, a negative and a negative is a positive. And 3 divided by 3, that just leaves me with 4. Minus 4, that gives me 0. Oh, that's interesting. And then here I get negative 3 times, so negative 3 divided by 3 gives me negative 1 plus 3, so I get 2 out of that. Okay. All right, so now, finally, one of our cases kicked in. What does it mean when I have no variable and a number? Well, that translates into 0 equals 2, which is false. Okay, so what does that mean? That means we're dealing with no solution. Okay. Now, real quick, I just want to say this out loud so that everyone is clear on my feelings on this. I've had students that say, oh, I got no solution. I don't know why I spent 10 minutes doing this problem. I could have just written that out the first minute. Could you? Was there any indication prior to that last second that we had no solution? Not really, right? Imagine you're working for a company and your boss says, I want you to check out this city and see if we can open up a branch in that city. See if we're going to make money and how much money we could possibly make. And you go out to the city, you do the research, you talk to potential customers, and you look at housing costs, and you look at all the variables, and you come back and you realize, if we move out to this particular location, we're going to lose money, and we're going to lose a lot of money. So you come back and you say to your boss, hey, I've looked at this, and the best solution is for us not to move out there. In other words, the best solution is no solution. Let's not do it. Is your boss really going to turn to you and say, you've wasted my time, how dare you? Or will your boss thank you for putting all that time and effort just to find out that that's not the best solution at this time? Right? I hope you feel that your boss would actually thank you rather than punish you for coming back and saying, after researching it, this is what I found. So having a mathematical solution of no solution is a good thing. And you didn't waste any time to get there. Hopefully you were able to match my numbers because I'm not just going to look that there was no solution. I'm going to look at this last row and see that your numbers match mine, that you actually did get no solution rather than guess and hope and, get no solution because you guessed it. Anyways, we're going to try one more. Okay, first task is to write it in augmented form. So -3, 1, 1, 1, 4, -3, 2, and 2, 5, -3, 1, and 1. Okay, right out the bat, first thing I notice is I cannot do a row swap. So what do I do to get a 1 there? I'm going to have to divide or multiply by the reciprocal to get a 1 to show up. So I'm going to do -1/3 times row 1 in for row 1. And yes, that will bring fractions into this problem very early. But we're okay with that, right? Okay, now I did not mess with row 2 or row 3. Okay, so negative, I'll kind of write this out here in case you need to see it. So -1/3 times, I got 4 of these. All right, and that's row 1, so -3, 1, 1, 1. Okay, well 3 of them are the same, so that's nice. So that gives me a 1 up top and a -1/3 for all the other positions. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with fractions, right? Okay, so what is my next goal? My next goal are to get the 4 and the 5 underneath that 1 to say 0. Okay, so I am going to have to, let's see, what do I multiply 1 by to get it to say 1 times something to cancel out the 4? So I want -4 times row 1 plus row 2 in for row 2. And then same thing for 5. I want -5 times row 1 plus row 3 in for row 3. Man, I'm liking this problem already. We're going to have to hang out with a lot of fractions. All right, so let me set this up. So -4, I got 4 combos of this. Oops. Only row I did not mess with is row 1. Let's see. So it's -4 times row 1, so that would be a 1, -1/3, -1/3, -1/3. And then row 3, I'm sorry, row 2, whoops, getting ahead of myself. 4, -3, 2, and 2. All right, so we might have to write this out very carefully. Oh, sorry, I lied. Still need to see that for the next row op there. Okay, so let's work out the first part. Okay, so -4 times 1 plus 4. Okay, so that part's 0. Oops, I want that to be black. Okay. All right, so here we get -4 times -1/3. So we get 4/3 minus 3. Okay, so can we think of another way to write 3? So 4/3 minus 9/3. Okay, so that's -5/3. Let's see, so go down below. We get 4/3 again, plus 2. Now we do get that twice, so at least we got to do this once. So 4/3 plus, and is there another way to write 2? Yeah, that's 6/3. All right, so we get 10/3 out of that. Yay! Okay, I'm on board with that. So now we've got another brick of fractions. All right, and then we have that -5 times row 1. All right, so let me write that out. So -5 times something plus something. So we can see that. All right, and then our old row 1 was 1, negative a third, negative a third, and negative a third. And then the other row 3 was 5, negative 3, 1, 1. Okay. All right, so what does that give us? Let's see, that top number is 0. Well, that's nice. That's kind of why we made that choice. Then we get 5 thirds minus 3. Okay, so that would be, in terms of thirds, so that 3 would be negative 9 thirds. We kind of did that one earlier. So 5 thirds minus 9 thirds is negative 4 thirds. All right, luckily we have the same problem for these last two. So that would be 5 thirds plus 1, so 5 thirds plus 3 thirds, which gives us 8 thirds for the last two. Okay. All right, what's our next goal again? Our next goal is to get a 1 in the middle. Okay. I'm just going to cordon off this. I'm just going to bring it up over here. Okay, so to get a 1 in the middle, what does it say right now? It says negative 5 thirds. So is there something I can multiply negative 5 thirds by to get it to say 1? Well, that's the whole reciprocal thing again. So negative 3/5 times row 2 in for row 2. All right, so we probably get a sense we're going to have to do this, write this out. So it's negative 3/5, negative 3/5, negative 3/5. All right, and what are my numbers? 0, negative 5 thirds, 10 thirds, and 10 thirds. And again, we have two of the same, so that kind of helps. Okay, so let me copy this over here so we figure it out. So we have 1, negative 1 third, negative 1 third, and negative 1 third. And we'll figure out row 2 in a second, but that row 3 we can copy over. 8 thirds and 8 thirds. Okay, so what do we get for this one? We get 0, perfect. The 3's divide out, the 5's divide out, we're left with 1. Okay, great. Now, if your fraction skills are a little nervous, if I just scare you to death, just all these fractions, you have a calculator near you, hopefully, you know, and I try to tell my face-to-face students, at your level of math, either be good by hand or know how to use your calculator. If you don't know it by hand and you don't know how to use your calculator, one of those needs to change. Okay, so if you don't know how to use your calculator, let me know in class. What next? So again, the 3's divide out, 5 goes into 10 twice, so we're left with negative 2. So we get negative 2 show up twice. Okay, well, we got to hang out with fractions for a brief moment, for part of it. All right, now what? Now what's our next goal? Well, our next goal is to get that negative 4 thirds to say 0. Okay, so our row op then, so what do I multiply 1 by to get it to cancel out with 4 thirds? Well, that's 4 thirds times row 2 plus row 3 in for row 3. Let me write that out a bunch of times. We're gonna have, it's got fractions. We're gonna have to be very careful about how we do that. Okay, so let's fill in row 2. So 1, negative 2, I'm sorry, 0, 0, 1, negative 2, and negative 2. And then row 3, which is 0, negative 4/3, 8/3, and 8/3. All right, so that gives us 0 up top. That's good. 4/3 minus 4/3 is 0. Okay. Negative 8/3 plus 8/3. Uh-oh, 0. It's that moment. Negative 8/3 plus 8/3. Okay. So we have this nice, lovely, I did all this. I think Professor Soleil has been doing this for a long time. I think this is the last problem, and then I'm going to call it quits on this lesson. So we got all those numbers, and then I forgot to transfer it over. Okay. Yeah, that's a long day for me. All right, so our bottom row now says 0, 0, 0, 0. All right, and then we have 0, 1, negative 2, and negative 2. And then we have 1, negative 1/3, negative 1/3, negative 1/3. Okay. Now, what does that row mean? The fact that I have a row of zeros. I get 0 equals 0, that's true. That means I'm dealing with a dependent case. Okay, so now we got to think. What is the rule for the dependent case? I need to come up with a series of equations of one variable in terms of the other. So I need x and y in terms of z. So what does that second row mean? The second row means y minus 2z equals negative 2. So to get y by itself, I'm going to add negative 2z. So y would equal 2z minus 2. Okay, I'm going to need that. What does, separate that, what does the top row say? The top row says x minus 1/3 y minus 1/3 z equals negative 1/3. Okay, well, I'm going to isolate out x. So bring the negative 1/3 y and the negative 1/3 z over. So 1/3 y plus 1/3 z minus 1/3. And then I'm going to substitute in that lovely expression of z, 2z minus 2 into the y. All right, so that gives me x equals 2/3 z minus 2/3 plus 1/3 z minus 1/3. You're going to love this. Look at your like terms. You get 2/3 z plus 1/3 z, so that's a whole one. That's 3/3 or just 1 z, minus 2/3 minus 1/3, so that's minus 3/3 or 1. Okay, so our solution set to this is x equals z minus 1, y equals, I can't remember, 2z minus 2, and z is any number. Okay, but what I really liked about this problem, we hung out with fractions for most of it, even though they didn't show up in our final solution. We still got to play with fractions and practice some fraction rules. So, it requires patience, and endurance. Good luck on your homework. Let me know if you have any questions.